welcome to the first part of our Discovery Tour playthrough of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I'm doing this for a friend of mine, and if anybody else watches this, I hope you enjoy as well. For the first part, we are going to do the Art, Religion, and Myths section of the Discovery Tour, which will be 5 separate tours, totaling in length around an hour and 15 minutes, not accounting for loading screen times. I'm gonna have the game read out the main parts, do a dialogue thing, and then I will be reading the more information sections. So I hope that this is an enjoyable experience, and hope that you can learn something alongside me as we explore the aspects of ancient Greece. I'm just gonna change my character for preference. And we're gonna start with the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games. Take a day-to-day look at the prestigious Olympic Games.
Hail, friend, and welcome to Olympia, home of the Olympic Games.
Who are you?
My name is Varnavas, and I'm a ship captain. Don't be fooled by my eye. Though I've seen my share of combat, I mostly stick to trading these days. Well, trading and introducing visitors like you to wonderful sights like this.
What do you think of this place?
I've often dreamed of competing in the games. If my sight was better, my legs and arms were stronger, and my coin purse was fatter. But that is not what the gods want, so I continue making the best of the path they've laid out for me.
I would like to begin the tour.
We're standing in the main section of Olympia, where the Olympic Games themselves took place. Over the course of the festival, athletes competed against each other for prestige and glory to honor themselves and their cities. Enjoy your visit, friend. I'll check in when you're done to make sure you've been paying attention.
The first day of the Olympic Festival began with a swearing-in ceremony for the participating athletes, trainers, and judges. The ceremony took place in front of the altar of Zeus Horkios, or Zeus of the Oath. Athletes would swear that they would follow the Olympic rules, while judges promised to be fair and unbiased. Then the competitions began, starting with a contest between heralds and trumpeters over who would have the privilege of announcing the games. The first day's athletic competitions consisted of wrestling, running, and boxing events for the youngest athletes, aged 12 to 18.
Day 1. The competition of heralds and trumpeters was introduced to the Olympic Games in 396 BCE. The winners of the contest were chosen based on their loudness and clarity. During the games, the trumpeter's main purpose was to demand the audience's attention while the herald announced the start of the competitions. The herald also proclaimed the names, fathers, and hometowns of the victorious athletes during the final crowning ceremony. And the image description is a red figure Kylix drinking cup with a scene of a warrior blowing in trumpet.
The second day began with a grand procession into the Hippodrome to celebrate the start of the popular equestrian events. The most anticipated and spectacular of these was the Quadriga, a four-horse chariot race. Horse racing events were unique in that the winner was not the most skilled jockey, but the owner of the fastest horse or chariot. The Spartan princess Kaniska once took advantage of this loophole to skirt the rule that women weren't allowed to compete and earned 2 Olympic victories in the process. The rule also allowed for occasionally strange results, like in 416 BCE, when the statesman Alcibiades entered 7 chariots into a race and won first, second, and fourth place. After the equestrian competitions, the 40,000 spectators migrated to the stadium to watch the pentathlon events. When the day's events were over, funeral rites were performed for the hero Pelops, the mythical founder of the Olympic Games. The night ended with a celebratory feast and a great parade in honor of the day's victors.
The Athenian statesman Alcibiades once bought and enrolled 7 chariots in a race. This turned out to be a good investment, as his purchases ended up winning first, second, and fourth place. Alcibiades' victory earned him an enormous feast and an equally enormous boost in popularity. He leveraged this popularity to wield considerable power over Athens' other politicians, and would often reference his Olympic feat to get people to take his side on a variety of issues. This backfired spectacularly when Alcibiades convinced Athens to send a military expedition to Sicily. The expedition ended in disaster and signaled the beginning of the end of Athens' power. The image description is Quadriga racer crowned by Nike on reverse of a decadrachm of Syracuse.
Victory at the Olympic Games was one of the highest honors a mortal could achieve, and there were several ways to immortalize that honor. Some athletes had statues erected of themselves, while others commissioned poets to write them victory odes. Oral tradition was very important to the Greeks. These odes, called eponychia, were often composed by the finest poets in the land, such as Pindar, Simonides, and Bacchylides. They were usually played at banquets and celebrations attended by the triumphant athlete or upon his departure from Olympia.
Pindar, alive during 518 BCE to 443 BCE, was a Greek poet who originally hailed from Thebes. He was very sought after in his time and composed several odes for victorious athletes. Pindar's popularity earned him commissions all over Greece, from Sicily in the west all the way to Cyrene in North Africa. Many of the commissions were from members of the ruling aristocracies, such as Hieron of Syracuse, for whom Pindar composed 4 odes. The image's description is Pindar oil painting by Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, alive from 1780 to 1867.
The pentathlon took place at the stadium on the second day. As its name implies, it was made up of 5 events: discus throwing, javelin throwing, jumping, racing, and wrestling. There are several differences between the ancient version of events and their contemporary counterparts. For example, ancient long jumpers held weights in their hands to give them momentum to launch, since there was no run-up before the jump. Similarly, if an athlete won the first 3 events, they were immediately declared the winner, instead of being judged by their overall performance in all 5 events. Running events work the same as they do today, with the notable exception of all the athletes being nude. As for wrestling, competitors were not divided by weight class as they are today, but instead by age. The winner was the first to throw his opponent to the ground 3 times.
Earlier Olympic Games were only open to adult men. At the 37th Olympiad in 632 BCE, Paides, young boys, were welcome to compete in stadion races and wrestling, albeit in a separate category from older competitors. The youngest competitor to ever win an Olympic event was Damaskos of Mycenae, who won a stadion race in 368 BCE at the age of 12. He continued to win well into adulthood, contradicting Aristotle's belief that a child athlete's success never carried over into adulthood. The image's description is black figure skyphos with scenes of wrestling.
Day 3 started with the most important event of the festival. A procession of Hellanodikai, ambassadors, competitors, and animals made their way to the great altar in front of the Temple of Zeus. The animals were then offered as the official sacrifice of the festival. The afternoon of Day 3 was dedicated to foot racing events. Running was the oldest event of the Games, and in fact was the only event at the first Olympics. The main race was called the Stadion, which was a sprint of around 180 meters. The winner was granted the honor of lending his name to the 4-year period between the Games. This period was known as the Olympiad. The 4 years that followed the first Games in 776 BCE were known as the Olympiad of Coroebus of Elis, the first Olympic champion. Once all the competitions were over, a public banquet was held in the Prytaneon to celebrate the day's victors.
Running events were categorized by length. The stadion race was named after its unit of measurement. In Greece, a stadion was equal to about 180 meters. The Dialos race was twice the distance of the stadion, as runners had to run the length of the track and then run back. Its name was derived from the aulos, a flute whose V shape matched the round trip of the race. The Doklios was a long-distance race where competitors ran approximately 20 or 24 times the length of the stadion. Since it was less exciting to watch than a shorter, fast-paced race, the Doklios served as an opening event. The image's description is a Panathenaic amphoria with Doklios runners.
Day 4 was mainly for combat events. Wrestling matches were held in the morning, followed by boxing and pankration. Pankration was a no-holds-barred mix between wrestling and boxing. Almost all moves were permitted, except for biting, poking the eyes or mouth, and striking the genitals. The event was very popular, and it was seen as the ultimate expression of strength and technique. Later on in the afternoon, there was a unique racing event called the Hoplitodromos, or Race in Armor. In this event, competitors wore a helmet and held a shield to simulate running in the battlefield.
The Hoplitodromos originated in 520 BCE at the 65th Olympiad. It consisted of 25 competitors running the same length as the Dialos race while carrying bronze shields provided for them from the Temple of Zeus. The Hoplitodromos was an emblematic of the close relationship in Greece between sports and war. Both shared qualities admired by the Greeks, such as effort, endurance, and courage. The image's description is Hopalodromos runner on starting position.
The Hellenodikai, or judges of the Greeks, were both the game's adjudicators and their organizers. They hailed from Elis, the city in charge of the sanctuary of Olympia, and new judges were elected each Olympiad. They had several responsibilities. Before the game started, they decided which athletes would be allowed to compete and supervise their training. They also drew lots to make the competition brackets. During the games themselves, they picked the winners and kept an eye out for foul play. For the latter, they were assisted by stick and whip-wielding umpires who stood near the athletes and punished them if they were caught cheating.
Athletes came to Olympia in pursuit of glory, but sometimes that pursuit was fatal. There was always a chance of death at the games. In some events, like boxing and pancration, were extremely dangerous. Competitors were aware of this danger, and some even embraced it. In fact, before events, many athletes prayed for Zeus to grant them either victory or death. Arguably, the most infamous death was that of Archeon, a two-time Pancration champion. Archeon was looking to win a third title for himself in 564 BCE. He made it all the way to the final match, but then his opponent put him in a stranglehold. Desperate to escape, Archeon kicked hard at his opponent's foot, dislocating it in the process. The pain caused the opponent to submit to the umpires, but at the same time, Archeon tried twisting out of his grip. The movement snapped Archeon's neck and killed him, but since his opponent had submitted mere seconds before, Archeon was still declared the victor. Wow. The lad died, but still won. Nice. The image description is Panthetic amphora with scene of Pancration with judge.
Victory in Olympia was one of the most prestigious honors in all of Greece. Not only would victors be showered in glory in their home city, but their names would be known across Greece. The temptation to glory led some athletes to break their oath to Zeus and cheat. This could be dangerous, as there were many possible punishments should cheaters be caught. They could be disqualified and fined, or if they were caught cheating during a match, they would be beaten by nearby umpires. The most powerful deterrent of cheating, however, was shame. At the foot of Mount Kronios, and on the way to the stadium, were a group of bronze statues called Zanes, the plural of Zeus. These statues were inscribed with the names of the cheating athletes, how they cheated, and the fine that was imposed. The Zanes, which were funded by cheaters' fines, were strategically placed to be highly visible. Individuals or even entire cities could be found guilty of cheating.
Ambition sometimes led athletes to bribery. This was seen as extremely odious, as the game started with them swearing an oath to Zeus himself that they would follow the rules. Even so, corruption still found its way into the games. Both the boxer Ipholos of Thessaly and the Pancratius Calipos of Athens paid other competitors to let them win. Hellenodiki could also be corrupt, although incidences of them cheating were less common. For example, in 372 BCE, a judge was suspected of corruption when he won 2 horse races, and as a consequence, his right to buy horses and chariots was suspended. The image's description is Zeus throwing a thunderbolt.
Prytaneon was the administrative center of the cult of Olympia and the Olympic Games. The building housed the sanctuary's priests as well as the game's officials. It was also used to stage the grand banquet held on the evening of the third day to honor victors. It also had a sacred function. Its central chamber was the location of the Fire of Hestia, a sacred flame that burned day and night. This fire was used to light the other altars around the sanctuary. This practice may have partially inspired the modern tradition of carrying the Olympic torch.
Public and private banquets played different roles in Greek society. Private banquets were held for aristocrats to meet, discuss ideas, and display their wealth and power. Public banquets, on the other hand, were usually organized by the state and thrown for civic, religious, or political reasons. They also helped reinforce a sense of unity and political order. The religious aspects of public banquets were reflected in their meals, which usually consisted of meat left over from an earlier animal sacrifice. The image description is a red figure, a dinos, with a scene of banquet.
Hello again! I hope you enjoyed your visit. With their spectacular events and lavish banquets, the Olympic Games were a feast for the senses. I am certain even Zeus himself was entertained by the festivities. Now, is there anything else you'd like to do? Wonderful! Let the mental Olympics begin.
Let's take a quiz.
Let's start with an easy one. Which notable woman won an event in the Games?
Nice. Oh, I'm so bad with names. It's one of these top two.
Correct! She won 2 equestrian events thanks to her savvy horse purchases. This next question is slightly more challenging. Which of the following is not a famous Greek poet?
It's not Pindar.
You are right! Brasidas was a renowned Spartan general, and he didn't have time for rhymes and pretty words. Time for the final question. How many events were in the pentathlon?
The pentathlon? It's 5?
Yes! The Greek word for pende means 5, and the pentathlon had 5 events. Well done, my friend! You truly possess a sharp mind. Very well. Safe travels, my friend.
Okay. Next up, let's do the School of Greece music. There we go. Attend the Odeon and learn more about ancient Greek music.
Welcome to Athens, Wanderer. More specifically, welcome to the musical hub of the city, the Odeon.
Who are you?
My name is Aspasia. Though I am not originally from Athens, I have climbed to the top of its social ladder using my wit and intellect. I've even earned the love of Pericles, one of the most powerful men in the city. The mind truly is a beautiful thing.
What do you think of this place?
Sometimes, when the burdens of life begin to weigh heavy on my shoulders, I come here, close my eyes, and surrender myself to the music. It makes me feel like I'm a child again. My mother singing me to sleep with a gentle lullaby.
I'd like to begin the tour.
The Odeon was where musicians came to share their songs with the public. The melodies played here caught the wind and drifted through the air, soothing the souls of Athenians across the city. Come find me when your visit is complete, and we will talk about the things you've learned. See you soon, wanderer.
Music played an important part in almost every aspect of ancient Greek life. Whether attending a public gathering, rubbing elbows at a dinner party, laying out offerings in a temple, or marching into battle, there was a song for everything. Aristotle even wrote that music increased the efficiency of laborers, and it was often played for rowers and field pickers to keep them working at a steady rhythm.
For Greeks, the word music had a very broad definition. Musicae technic, or musical art, technically included what we today consider to be music, but it also encompassed any art thought to be inspired by the muses, including poetry, dance, comedy, tragedy, and epics. In fact, it was rare for things like poetry and plays to be performed without accompanying songs and dances. When it came to instruments, musicians favored a flute called the aulos, the guitar-like kithara, and its smaller cousin, the lyre, and the tympanon, a hand drum that helped set and keep the music's tempo. Female dancers were also known to use an instrument called the crotala, or clackers. Clackers were almost always played in pairs, and as their name implies, made percussive clacking noises. The image description is a red figured cup with the scene of a young musician and his music teacher.
Musical contests, or agones, were originally only held during religious festivals. Over time, they became cultural events in their own right, and attracted musicians and spectators from all over the Greek world. For example, the Athenian Panathenaea festival featured competitions for instrument playing and poetry recitation. The Dionysia festival included contests between groups of male singers to see who could best perform a dithyramb, a merry hymn in honor of the god Dionysus. While these contests could be attended by all, women weren't allowed to compete in them. In the early days of the competitions, winners only received a crown and an ego boost for their talents. But from the Hellenistic period onward, the rewards were upgraded to cash prizes. These prizes were large enough for musicians to make a fortune, especially if they moved from festival to festival.
Music played a large role in ancient education. Children were taught to play instruments by either public or private tutors, and could choose to learn the lyre, the aulos, or how to sing poetry. Those who sought careers as professional musicians received even more specialized training. The importance of music in education was a point of contention between two of the most famous philosophers of ancient Greece, Plato and Aristotle. Plato encouraged the teaching of the kithara in his Protagoras, where he said that by learning the instrument, boys could become efficient in speech and action. Meanwhile, Aristotle said in Politics that children should be forbidden from learning the aulos, as part of their schooling, as the flute was too exciting an instrument. The image description is a tetradrachm of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, struck in Antioch on the Orontes for the Panhellenic festival at Daphne in 166 BCE. The reverse depicts Apollo holding a kithera. That was a lot.
The Odeon of Pericles was built sometime between the 440s and 430s BCE. The building was commissioned by Pericles for use in the Panathenaea festival. The Odeon was also a venue for poetry readings, political rallies, and philosophical performances. According to ancient sources, the original design of the Odeon was inspired by the tent of the Persian king Xerxes, a spoil of war the Athenians salvaged after their decisive victory at Salamis in 480 BCE. The building's roof was made of timber from captured Persian ships. In this sense, the Odeon was both a triumphant symbol of Athens and an insult to their Persian enemies. This structure was considered one of the grandest architectural accomplishments of ancient Athens.
In ancient Greece, poem recitations were always accompanied by music, sometimes even dancing. These sung poems were performed by oides, singers, or rhapsodos, who specialized in epic poems. Rhapsodos especially were held in high esteem, particularly if they were part of the Homeridae, sons of Homer, a group that hailed from the islands of Chios, who claimed to be descendants of the legendary Greek poet. Aedos and Rhapsodos were entrusted with maintaining the Greek tradition of oral storytelling. In Athens, they were required by law to perform Homeric poems at every Panathenaeic festival. However, art on Greek vases depicts Rhapsodos clad in cloaks, holding staffs characteristic of travelers, implying that the singers toured the countryside as well. The image description is Attic red-figured Lekythos depicting a rhapsode holding a lyra and a walking staff.
In ancient Greece, there was a type of music for almost any occasion. Complicated songs like hymns, paeans, and dithyrambs were meant for the ears of the gods, and as such were usually played during religious ceremonies and civic life. Meanwhile, a hymnaeus was a song performed at weddings, and a threnody accompanied funeral processions. For more merry occasions like symposia, scholia were the soundtrack of choice. However, drama was considered the epitome of artistic expression, since it combined songs with poetry, dance, acting, and costumes. Plays were thought to be the connection between mortals and gods, and the songs that accompanied them, especially those from the tragedies of Euripides, often became huge hits in the rest of Greece.
Hymns are metric compositions addressed to a god. They generally contain numerous lines praising the god and describing their deeds and benevolence, then end with a prayer. A paean is a specific type of hymn, usually addressed to Apollo, Artemis, Zeus, Dionysus, Asclepios, or Hygieia. According to Proclus, they were usually sung for the cessation of plagues and maladies. Dithyrambs, on the other hand, were passionate celebratory songs linked with Dionysus, the god of wine. Dithyrambs often kicked off the many religious festivals celebrated in places like Delos, Delphi, and Athens. In addition to the different genres of music, there were also varied types of scales and intervals. These so-called harmoniae were named based on their ethnic origin: Dorian, Lindian, and Phrygia. These were designed to stir different types of emotions in the audience, as described in Aristotle's Politics. In the nature of the mere melodies, there are differences, so that people, when hearing them, are affected differently and not have the same feelings in regard to each of them, but listen to some in a more mournful and restrained state. For instance, at the mode called mixolydian, and to others in a softer state of mind, but in a midway state with the greatest composure to another, as the Dorian mode alone of tune seems to act, while the Phrygian makes men enthusiastic. The description is Red Bell Crater with representation of musicians in a symposium.
Hello again. I trust your visit was worthwhile, and that learning of music was a feast for your mind. I know it was for mine. Is there anything else you'd like to do?
Let's try the quiz.
Fancy yourself an expert on music? Then let's put your knowledge to the test. Which of the following songs was played at weddings?
I have no idea.
Threnodias were funeral dirges. They were unlikely to be played at
no.
weddings unless the musicians had a morbid sense of humor. Try another answer.
Oh no.
A pean was a hymn to the gods. It was not sung at weddings. Keep trying. Correct. A Imeneos was performed at weddings to wish the couple a happy and prosperous union. Let's move on to the second question. The Odeon of Pericles was modeled after spoils of war from which Athenian enemy?
Oh, yeah, I know that. That's Persia.
Correct. Not only was the design based on the tent of the Persian king Xerxes, but the building's roof was made of wood from captured Persian ships. Only one question remains. According to Aristotle, music was especially important to which group of people?
Children.
Aristotle actually believed music should not be part
wait.
of children's education,
No, it was,
as it would
the other
distract
one.
them from their studies. Try again. You are correct.
Yeah.
Aristotle believed music improved certain motor skills, so it was played for field pickers and rowers to increase their work output. You definitely have an ear for music, Wanderer. I applaud you.
That's all.
Farewell, Wanderer. I hope you enjoyed the sweet sounds of the Odeon.
What's the discovery?
They'll ride through the fire they face.
Behind the scenes, music was everywhere in ancient Greece, and we wanted to reflect on this in the game. Musicians played in the sanctuaries, the Olympics, and villages in the cities. Music had many uses, including singing and playing during ceremonies, creating rhythm during combat training, and for entertainment. Working closely with our musicians in the UK, Canada, and Greece, we created original songs that reflected important moments in the story, instrumental music to provide entertainment throughout the world, and ancient Greek sailor songs for the boat. Lydia Andrew. The image's description is inspired by the art of Assassin's Creed Odyssey by Kate Lewis, with courtesy from Titan Books. Well, I was curious about a discovery site, but we are not doing those today. Next up, I'm actually going to go out of order real quick, because if I'm going to do one school of Greece, I feel like I'm going to do the other school of Greece next. Oh, it's you again.
Welcome, wanderer, to one of the most prestigious places in Greece, the theater.
What do you think of this place?
I'd tell you, but I think it's best to let the actors speak for themselves.
I would like to begin the tour.
The theater was where audiences gathered to watch plays. They were the highest form of art in Greece, and people saw theater as a symbol of complete harmony between the mortal world and the divine. When you're done taking in the sights and sounds, come see me, and we'll talk more. Until then, wanderer.
Theater is not just part of geek culture, but was a major part of Greek culture. In Athens, comedies and dramas originated from the dancing and singing performed by members of the cult of Dionysus. Between 536 and 533 BCE, theater's burgeoning importance in Athens was demonstrated when the responsibility of organizing tragedies was entrusted to the Archon, the highest-ranking magistrate in the city. From then on, theater grew rapidly in popularity, and soon, a permanent space for performing and watching plays was built on the slope of the Acropolis. During the 5th century BCE, theater became intertwined with Athens' democracy. It often functioned as an echo chamber for political ideas, and in some cases, it could even influence public opinion. As a result, in the 4th century BCE, Plato coined the term theatrocracy to describe his city's politics.
Athenian dramatic contents featured three types of drama: comedies, tragedies, and raunchy satire plays. These plays were not just dramatic stories, but complete performances accompanied by music, singing, and dancing. These elements combined to form an exquisite tribute to the god Dionysus. Sadly, only a few plays from the classical Athens have survived. Those of the famous tragedians Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, in the work of the comic poet Aristophanes. Aeschylus was born in 525 BCE. He was part of a wealthy noble family and was present at many famous battles, including the Battle of Marathon, the Battle of Salamis, and the Battle of Plataea. As a result, the Greco-Persian Wars heavily influenced his work as a playwright, and his first tragedy, The Persians, was a celebration of the Battle of Salamis. Sophocles was born a few years before the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. He was a friend of Pericles and was incredibly prolific, writing over 120 plays in his lifetime, including Oedipus Rex, Ajax, and Elyctra. Euphrates was the youngest of the three tragedians, born in 480 BCE. Unlike Aeschylus and Sophocles, he came from a modest family, and though his plays were not as celebrated as the other two, they became very successful after his death. He introduced many innovations to theater, especially in the field of music. Aristophanes was a comic playwright. Though he is considered the father of comedy, little is known about his life. What is known is that he was a proponent of peace, and that his plays often reference Athenian politics. The most frequent targets of his plays were Cleon, Euphrates, Socrates, and the Sophists. Image description is theater representation, concept art by Caroline Susi.
Μετά αυτοί παριστάνε το άλγος αυτό.
Theatrical competitions were held in the sanctuary of Dionysus Eleutherius, god of wine and patron of drama. Dionysus was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Semele. Stories say that Zeus, who had fallen in love with Semele, appeared to her holding a lightning bolt in his hand. Semele was tragically struck dead by the lightning, but Zeus managed to save her unborn child, keeping the embryo in his thigh until it fully gestated. This is why the name Dionysus is sometimes thought to mean born twice. In Athens, theater was a part of the cult of Dionysus, and stage productions in the god's honor were held during festivals like the Linnaea and the Great Dionysia.
The Theater of Dionysus, as it exists today, dates back to the 4th century BCE, when the statesman Lycurgus reorganized the sanctuary. It features a circular orchestra with a stone scene, or stage, in front of it. However, archaeologists believe that the original shape of the orchestra was a square. In the Hellenistic period, 67 marble thrones reserved for city officials were added around the orchestra. At the center of this row was a seat meant for the priests of Dionysus. During the Roman period, a new stage was built in honor of both the god and the Emperor Nero, and extra seats of honor were added around the edge of the orchestra. Image description is tetradrachm of Thasos with the head of Dionysus.
In Athens, there were 3 festivals that honored Dionysus with drama performances: the rustic Dionysias, the Linnaea, and the Great Dionysia. For the rustic Dionysia, each deme of Attica organized their own Dionysiac procession. The parades were full of phallic songs, dances, and symbols meant to signify fertility, and participants wore drunkard masks and sang bawdy lyrics about the god. The Linnaea was the oldest Dionysian festival. It was exclusively reserved for Greek citizens and mostly made up of comedy performances. Finally, the Great Dionysia was the most important festival. Taking place over several days, it began with a parade called a Phallophori, followed by a dithyramb contest, and ending with consecrated drama competitions.
From 450 BCE onwards, the city of Athens gave poor citizens free theater tickets, which were valued at 2 oboli. This initiative was provided for by a public fund called Theorikon, money for spectacles, and it consisted of the distribution of special tokens, or symbola. The purpose of Theorikon may have been to make sure poor citizens weren't denied access to the theater. The service was later extended to all citizens, regardless of wealth. Numerous bronze tokens for Athens theater have been preserved. They resemble contemporary coins stamped with either the head of Athena, a lion, or an owl. On the reverse side, they feature letters from the Greek alphabet that correspond to different sections and seats in the auditorium. The image description is a photo by James Anderson, born 1813 to 1877, of the Vatican statue of Euripides holding a theater mask.
The Great Dionysia was supervised by the head magistrate known as the Archon, who was assisted by 12 other magistrates. Among his duties, the Archon picked Korigoi, rich Athenian citizens responsible for providing the budget for rehearsals and performances. 2 days before the Dionysia, a ceremony called the Proagon took place where playwrights introduced their work. The Dionysia finally began in earnest with a procession to the god's temple, followed by sacrifices and a symposium. The next 2 days centered on dithyramb contests, while the final 4 days were dedicated to drama competitions. The contests' outcomes were decided by 10 judges, who were appointed at random by the Archon. The judges placed their votes in an urn, and 5 of the votes were randomly picked to determine the winner.
The Chorigia was an important and obligatory public service. Each year, several months before the Dionysia, the Archon would appoint 3 Chorigoi to fund tragedies and 3 to fund comedies. The appointed citizens were selected based entirely on how wealthy they were. The Chorigoi's duties were focused mainly on funding the chorus, specifically their recruitment, costuming, and support. They also had to provide a rehearsal space. If a play won a dramatic contest, the Chorigoi provided the victors with a sumptuous meal. Being a Chorigos granted opportunities for great prestige and public approval. When a play won a prize at the festival, ex-Chorigos was crowned alongside the playwright. Furthermore, the victorious Chorigos was expected to erect a monument near the theater with an inscription celebrating his achievements. The image's description is a votive relief of a poet receiving Dionysus and his procession, copy of a Greek original of the 1st century BCE.
All Athenian stage actors were male, regardless of whether they were playing men or women. Tragedies originally featured only one actor performing alongside a chorus, eventually reaching a maximum of 4. Adding more roles opened up the opportunity for dramatic dialogue. During performances, they prepared themselves in the skene, a building that served as a backstage area, before emerging onto the proskenion, or stage. The skene could be painted to represent backdrops like palaces, temples, and tombs. Its roof was reserved for appearances by the gods. These gods could be moved around with a crane called a mechane, which produced spectacular visual effects. On stage, actors wore masks and elaborate costumes. For tragedies, they were adorned with magnificent clothes, while for comedies, actors playing male characters wore hugely exaggerated phalluses, probably to maximize the laughs.
Actors in the 5th century BCE came, as far as we know, from theatrical families and were strictly divided between comedy and tragedy. For example, both Aeschylus and Euphrates had at least one son who performed as a tragic actor. Similarly, Aristophanes probably had 6 offspring who became comic poets or actors. All of these actors and poets came from wealthy families, which were probably the norm at the time. In the 4th century BCE, actors began to eclipse poets in popularity, becoming successful celebrities who traveled from city to city. One of the most popular destinations for actors was Macedon, as King Philip II of Macedon was allegedly a big fan of drama. The image's description is a terracotta statuette of a seated comic actor wearing his mask.
The centerpiece of the theater was the orchestra, or dancing place. It was a large, circular area that hosted choral performances, religious rites, and, presumably, acting. Choruses were composed of men wearing masks and costumes. Any Athenian citizen could be choritai, as long as they were selected by the chorus director. Chorus members also served as the equivalent of a curtain, as their entrance and exit marked the beginning and end of the play. New costumes and masks were produced for the chorus for every new play, and they were often just as impressive and elaborate as the performances. For example, Aristophanes' comedies featured the chorus dressing as wasps, frogs, birds, clouds, and islands. One of his plays, The Knights, even had men riding other men dressed as horses.
Comic and tragic actors used their voice to deliver the words of the play. but they also relied on nonverbal communication and body language to perform their role. Actors had their own specific way of gesturing called chironomia, which means the law of the hands. Due to the large spaces they performed in, as well as the masks that they wore, actors depended on broad movements and systematized gestures to clearly relay their emotions to the audience. The different postures, or cementa, that made up ceremonia were taught in gymnasia, rhetoric schools, and theater schools. While much of the repertoire of gestures has been lost, historians have been able to reconstruct parts of Chiaromia by examining the art on some ancient vases. The image's description is orchestra and a cavea of the Epidaurus Theater.
Athens' Theatron, or performance space, could seat up to 17,000 people, nearly a tenth of the population of Attica. Its excellent acoustics made it ideal for drama, but it was also sometimes used for political meetings and parades. The theater was accessible to everybody. This did not mean that seating was free, though. The first rows were normally where priests and public officials sat, while the central part of the auditorium was reserved for ambassadors and guests of honor. There is also evidence that men and women sat separately. In general, theater audiences were emotional and noisy. During performances, they would shout, curse, and throw things depending on their mood, and their reactions were just as much a part of the experience as the acting.
Originally, a play's text and music was not meant to be preserved, and the play's performance was meant to be a unique experience reserved for theatrical competitions. The text could be kept by the families of actors and authors, but otherwise it was not widely available. Over time, drama's increasing popularity beyond Attica made the re-performance of older plays more fashionable. Consequently, theatrical scripts started circulating more freely in the form of papyrus scrolls. The process of copying scripts was performed in a special workshops by literate scribes. The copies were not always perfect, and occasionally the play's text would be changed. These changes were still performed, and as a result, numerous versions of different plays were circulated through Athens between the 4th and 5th centuries BCE. It wasn't until the 4th century BCE that the Athenian orator Lycurgus implemented a decree that created a fixed canon for tragedies, featuring final and definitive versions of the plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. The description is just the theater of Thasos.
Hello again, Wanderer. I hope your visit was entertaining. Though all art forms were important in Greek culture, none had the same prestige as theater, which provided a unique experience with every performance. Is there anything else you'd like to do?
Let's try and take the quiz.
Really? Then let's begin. Who was Dionysos' mother?
Semele.
Correct! Unfortunately, Semele died before her son was born, but Zeus saved the unborn baby and raised him as a god. Next, another question. Which competitions took place on the 2nd and 3rd days of the Great Dionysia?
Dithyramb, right?
Yes, the Thyramvi were hymns dedicated to Dionysos, and the Thyrambos contests were held on the 2nd and 3rd days of the festival. And finally, the last question. Which of the following is the oldest festival dedicated to Dionysos?
It's the Great Dionysia.
The Great Dionysia was one of the largest
no,
festivals
it's
dedicated
the,
to the god, but not
It's the
the
middle one
oldest.
they told us about.
Try a different answer.
It was the Leone.
You are correct. The Linnea was the oldest Dionysiac festival. Congratulations, Wanderer. You're a very studious theater goer.
That's all for now.
Then I will leave you be. Farewell, wanderer.
Next up, we're going to do Knossos. Learn more about the Minoan civilization as well as the mythological labyrinth and the Minotaur that dwelled within. Ooh.
Welcome to Knossos, traveler, where the Minotaur once prowled.
Who are you?
My name is Herodotus, and I am a traveler from Halicarnassus. I retrace the cause of various events, such as wars and great calamities. I describe what I see and record what I'm told, all with the aim of providing a better understanding of why these things occur. Look for me to introduce you to many sights.
What do you think of this place?
Some say, if you listen closely, you can still hear echoes of the Minotaur's ferocious bellowing. Of course, it may only be a trick of the wind. Perhaps.
I'd like to begin
Knossos
the tour.
was the seat of the old Minoan civilization, where King Minos once supposedly ruled. These ruins have been the backdrop for many important events in both history and mythology. Look for me when your visit is over, and we'll discuss what you've seen.
The island of Crete was first settled around 8000 BCE. Over time, significant towns and maritime trade began to develop. Palaces were built, destroyed, and then rebuilt, culminating in what archaeologists call the Neopalatial period, which began around 1700 BCE. This period lasted for over 300 years and is considered the golden age of Minoan civilization. The largest palace of this period was located in Knossos and featured maze-like complexes of workshops, temples, courts, throne rooms, and living areas, as well as paved roads and advanced plumbing and draining. Trade and external relations were important to the Minoans, and their networks extended across the eastern Mediterranean. As a result, the people of Crete and the lands they traded with often influenced each other and exchanged ideas, usually through peaceful interactions instead of military conflict.
Arthur John Evans was an archaeologist known for his excavations at Knossos from 1900 to 1931. He was so dedicated to his work at the site that he missed his father's funeral to preside over the excavation of Minos' palace. Arthur Evans named the Minoan civilization after King Minos, but it is unknown what the Minoans called themselves. The image's description is Knossos palace facade, painted by Balage Balog. Knossos Palace. This palace, the largest of all palaces, was built in the 17th century BCE. It's linked to the legend of King Minos. More than 13,000 square meters. It's made up of several rooms around a central courtyard. Nice. Thank you for the little information tidbit game.
The settlement of Knossos was established as early as the 7th millennium BCE. Today, one of the site's most notable landmarks is the palace ruins, located on the Kafala Hill. The ruins are split into two phases: the Old Palace, which has been poorly preserved, and the New Palace. The New Palace of Knossos had a surface area of approximately 13,000 square meters, making it the largest Minoan palace. Its focal point was a central court, which was probably used for ceremonial activities. The Minoan palace centers collapsed when Crete was overrun and conquered by a Mycenaean invasion from mainland Greece. However, the date of the final destruction of Knossos' palace is still unknown.
Author John Evans oversaw many architectural reconstructions at Knossos, with somewhat mixed results. On the negative side, Evans' restorations of the throne room prioritized how it supposedly looked in the late Bronze Age period, instead of representing the full spectrum of its history. Evans also overemphasized the Minoan identity of the site, leaving out the aspects of the Mycenaean culture that influenced Knossos' arts and architecture. On the positive side, the site's reconstruction helped save many parts of the site that would have otherwise been lost. Moreover, while the restoration of some art and architecture was inaccurate, it did help evoke the elegance and skill of Minoan architects and painters. The image's description is part of the Knossos Palace.
During the New Palace phase, the ground floor was dedicated to economic activities and contained large storage rooms. The residential quarters, which notably had toilets, were located southeast of the central court, at the foot of the grand staircase. The palace was lavishly decorated with wall paintings depicting things like bull-related sports and richly dressed women. Large stone horns of consecration, which were important Minoan religious symbols, hung prominently in the west court. Other notable parts of the palace include the theatrical area, which is believed to have served as a viewing space, the tripartite shrine, which was dedicated to the worship of an important Minoan deity historians refer to as the Mother Goddess, and the Piano Nobile, a grand space located on the palace's second floor.
One fresco excavated from Knossos in 1914, Ladies in Blue, has been reproduced for New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. The copy reproduces and embellishes fragments that were burnt or eroded on the original fresco. The image's description is reproduction of the Ladies in Blue fresco by Emile Gilerion Fils, 1927.
During his trips to Crete, archaeologist Arthur John Evans discovered several ancient tablets. They eventually led him to define the forms of Minoan writing known as Linear A and Linear B. The Minoans used these forms of writing for recording many things, including business transactions. For example, one clay tablet discovered at the Palace of Knossos was inscribed in Linear B script. The tablet detailed the transfer of coriander, often used in the perfume industry, between a man named Kyprios and another person named Twinon. The deciphering of tablets such as these has given historians great insight into many aspects of Minoan culture and society.
During the late Middle Minoan period, Minoans buried their dead in a terracotta coffin known as a larnax. Many larnax were found buried in a cemetery to the north of the town that surrounded the palace at Knossos. The coffins were shaped like bathtubs or chests, and were often elaborately painted with scenes that were probably chosen for their funerary significance. They were also sometimes buried alongside valuable grave offerings. It's possible the coffins had domestic uses as well, functioning either as bathtubs or storage chests. The image's description is a gay lentoid seal depicting wild goats. To the left of the seal, to the right, impressions made by the seal.
According to myth, the half-man, half-bull Minotaur was born after Queen Pasiphae slept with a bull sent by the gods as punishment upon her. This embarrassed King Minos, but he could not bring himself to kill the Minotaur. Instead, he hid the monster in a labyrinth constructed by Daedalus.
Depictions of bull leaping were prevalent throughout Minoan art, and bull leaping scenes are believed to have decorated the walls above ceremonial bull rings. However, the reasons for engaging in such an activity remain unknown. Mythical bulls like the Minotaur played important roles in a Minoan iconography. This is likely due to cattle being a vital asset in the Cretan economy, especially during the Bronze Age. Bull and cattle are even mentioned in various Linear B documents. The image's description is Ouroboros, shaped like the head of a minotaur.
Daedalus was an important figure in Greek mythology, an ingenious inventor. He once became so jealous of his similarly clever nephew that he threw him from the top of the Athenian Acropolis. As a consequence, Daedalus was banished from Athens, though this did not prevent him from being able to get work. In Crete, he was hired by Queen Pasiphae to construct an artificial cowsuit that would allow her to seduce a bull she was particularly taken with due to a curse from the gods. Daedalus complied, and his invention helped facilitate the birth of the Minotaur. Afterwards, Minos conscripted Daedalus to build the labyrinth, presumably as penance for his role in creating the Minotaur. But perhaps the most well-known story about Daedalus involves his son, Icaros, who used wings built by his father and flew too close to the sun, thus plummeting into the sea.
Much of the story of Daedalus, as we know it, comes from the Roman poet Ovid. While older versions of the story exist in ancient Greek sources, they vary wildly in their telling, and often contradict each other when it comes to specific details. The image's description is cameo of Icarus and Daedalus with Pasiphae and Artemis.
Sometime after the birth of the Minotaur, King Minos' son Androgeos was killed in Athens by the same bull that impregnated his mother. An infuriated Minos demanded that Athens send 7 of their noblest men and 7 of their most virtuous women to Knossos every year. After being carried to Crete aboard a ship with black sails, the men and women would then be cast into the labyrinth to be eaten by the Minotaur.
Go back. I didn't.
Sometime after the birth of the Minotaur, after
Yeah, I already heard that. Forgot to read this. Athens' donating of youthful men and women to Crete may have been based on a real payment of tribute to the Aegeans' dominant trading power in Bronze Age Greece. However, this is only a theory. The image's description is silver drachma Knossos with Hera on obverse and the labyrinth on reverse.
One of the Athenian youths chosen to be imprisoned in the labyrinth, Theseus, had enough of the morbid ritual. Before leaving Athens, he proclaimed he would kill the Minotaur, then return to his city on a ship flying white sails. Before entering the labyrinth, Theseus met King Minos' daughter, Ariadne, who fell madly in love with him. Ariadne provided Theseus with a thread he could unravel to help him find his way back out of the maze. Armed with this thread, Theseus entered the labyrinth, killed the Minotaur, escaped the maze, and set sail for Athens with Ariadne by his side.
After successfully killing the Minotaur, Theseus set sail for Athens with Ariadne, but stopped in Naxos for a long celebration. Due to the many hours of feasting and drinking, Ariadne fell asleep and forgot to return to Theseus's boat, which departed for Athens without her. In another version of the story, Theseus deliberately left Ariadne behind. When Theseus realized what he'd done to Ariadne, he was so distraught that he forgot to change the ship's sails from black to white. When his father, King Aegeus, saw the ominous black sails on Theseus' ship, he presumed his son was dead, and fraught with grief, threw himself into the sea. The image's description is Attic black figure amphora with a scene of Theseus killing the Minotaur. There he is.
I see you found your way through the Maze of Ruins. The Minoans played a large part in shaping Greek myths, but also in introducing influences from other places and cultures. Now, what else would you like to do?
Let's take the quiz.
You want to test yourself? Very well. Let's begin with a simple question. On which island was Knossos located?
Crete.
Yes, Knossos was located on the island of Crete. Time for another question. Which hero killed the Minotaur?
Theseus.
Correct. Theseus slew the Minotaur, then escaped the labyrinth thanks to some threat from Ariadne. Now for the last question. What did Daedalus build for Queen Pasiphae?
A cow suit.
Yes, Daedalus made Pasiphae a cowsuit so she could seduce the bull she was cursed to love. Congratulations, traveler. You are a true student of history.
That's all for now.
Farewell, traveler. I hope you enjoyed exploring the ruins.
And let's go to the last tour of this video, Gods in Love. Explore the Acrocorinth and discover the relationship between the gods and romance.
Hello, my friend! It is my pleasure to introduce you to Corinth's Temple of Aphrodite.
Who are you?
Why, I'm Marcos, of course, one of the most successful merchants in all of Greece. You really haven't heard of me? My name is known from Kefalonia to Kos. If you've ever paid money for something, I probably received a percentage. But enough about me. Let's go back to what you're doing here.
What do you think of this place?
It really is a lovely sight, isn't it? The temple, that is, not the ladies. Although they are also lovely. Lovely and lively and, I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
I would like to begin the tour.
In Greece, many love stories were told about the gods. How romantic. Sometimes they were heartwarming and happy, but they often ended in tears, tragedy, and a whole brood of illegitimate children. I'm looking at you, Zeus! Anyway, this tour will introduce you to some of these divine love stories, which may give you perspective on how the Greeks approached love in their own lives. Enjoy your visit, my friend. I'll come see you again when you finish the tour.
Much like Athens, Corinth had its own acropolis, called the Acrocorinth. The natural promontory provided an excellent view of the surrounding territory. It was also the home of several sanctuaries, allegedly constructed in the 6th century BCE. The Acrocorinth's most famous attraction was the Temple of Aphrodite. Pausanias describes it as having statues of Aphrodite, her son Eros, and the sun god Helios. According to Strabo, the temple's most distinguishing feature was its servants, who acted as sacred prostitutes. However, Strabo is the only source for this information, and it is still hotly debated to this day.
On the eve of the Battle of Salamis, the situation for the Greeks felt hopeless. After their loss at Thermopylae, the Persian king Xerxes' advance seemed unstoppable. Seeking solace in religion, the women of Corinth gathered at the temple of Aphrodite. According to the authors Pindar, Plutarch, and Athenios, the women prayed to the goddess, begging her for something, anything, to stop the Persian invasion. It seems their prayers were answered, and the Battle of Salamis ended with a glorious victory for the Greeks. The image description is a general view of ancient Corinth and Acrocorinth, picture attributed to Constantine Demetrios.
Love played a large role in countless mythological stories. Zeus himself was not immune to the feeling, and fell for both mortals and other deities. Some myths centered on forbidden feelings that led to tragedy, such as Phaedra's love for her stepson Hippolytus. While marriage was prominent in mythology, it was usually presented as problematic. For example, Aphrodite frequently cheated on her husband Hephaestus, and Medea's resentment against her ex-husband Jason eventually drove her mad enough to murder her children. These less-than-ideal depictions reflected the Greeks' idea of marriage, which they viewed as a civic duty instead of a romantic union.
The Homeric hymn to Aphrodite, which dates back to the 7th or 6th century BCE, tells the story of the goddess succumbing to the charms of a mortal man named Anchises. But upon Aphrodite herself, Zeus cast sweet desire to be joined in love with a mortal man, to the end that, very soon, not even she could be innocent of a mortal's love, lest laughter-loving Aphrodite should one day softly smile and say mockingly among all the gods that she had joined the gods in love with mortal woman who bare sons of death to deathless gods, and had mated the goddess with mortal men. And so he put in her heart sweet desire for Anchises, who at the time among the sheep hills of many-founted Ida was tending cattle, and in shape was like the immortal gods. Therefore, when laughter-loving Aphrodite saw him, she loved him, and terribly desire seized her in her heart. The image description is seen of Zeus running after a woman from a red figure crater.
The goddess Aphrodite was one of the mightiest Olympians, and was typically associated with love, beauty, and sex. She was worshipped all across the ancient Mediterranean by men and women, both young and old. Her origins differ depending on the version of the story. The poet Hesiod says that she was born from the severed genitals of Uranus, while Homer's version of the myth names her as the daughter of Zeus and Dione. Aphrodite appeared regularly in mythological stories and had many mortal lovers. Her favorite was Adonis, a beautiful boy who died tragically in a hunting accident. Aphrodite was devastated by his death, so she created a cult called the Adonia to commemorate him.
Eros was the god of. Eros was the god of sexual love. According to ancient poets like Alcman, Ibkios, and Sappho, he was young and beautiful, but also cunning, unpredictable, and cruel. The tragedian Euphrates later introduced the concept that Eros wielded a bow and arrows that induced feelings of love in whoever they struck. Eros was also a god of fertility. He was allegedly celebrated in places like Thespiae, Athens, and Elis. On vases and other art, he was usually depicted as winged and boyish, and was often represented alongside Aphrodite. He was also associated with women, domestic scenes, and weddings. Depending on the myth, he had various different mothers, including Alethea, Penia, Iris, Aphrodite, and Gaia. Hesiod, meanwhile, believed Eros was a primeval god who emanated from chaos. The image's description is marble statue of Aphrodite inspired by the Aphrodite of Praxiteles.
My friend, good to see you again. I bet you were surprised by some of the stories you heard. For a bunch of immortal beings, the gods certainly were saucy, eh? Tell me if there's
Marcus
anything
is
else I can do for you.
Let's take the quiz.
Is that so, my friend? Then let's get started. Which poet said that Aphrodite was the daughter of Zeus and Dione?
Marcos. I know. I just gotta choose this for the last.
I am exceedingly flattered that you think I'm a poet. Unfortunately, I am a mere brilliant but misunderstood businessman. Keep trying, though. Hesiodos's version of this story said Aphrodite was the product of Uranus's chopped olives, so to speak. So, no.
Homer?
Yes, it was
I
Homer
thought
who
it
said
was Homer, but I
Aphrodite was a
second-guessed
child of
myself.
Zeus. On to the next question. Medea was married to which legendary hero?
Jason.
Yes, Medea was married to Iason, but after he left her for
Iason?
someone else, she resented him so much she murdered their children. But let's not talk about such depressing things. Instead, you can answer this last question. What was the name of Corinth's Acropolis? Correct! The Acrocorinth has been home to many sanctuaries, as well as the famous Temple of Aphrodite. You passed the test! Congratulations, my intelligent friend! Normally, I don't let people go until they buy a souvenir, but for you, my friend, I'll make an exception!
Man, I vibe with Marcos so much. He's a fun guy. And that's all for art, religion, and myths. Next time we'll be doing one of the 4 remaining sections, either daily life, politics and philosophy, battles and wars, or famous cities. Also unlock some new characters. I think I'm going to switch to a Spartan soldier. I hope we can get someone like Archidamos, because he seems fun to use. The Minotaur fraud. Nice. Yeah, look at that. Look at that beautiful plume. Well, thank you for joining me on this first of our adventures. I hope to see you next time. And sorry for butchering some of the words, but some of them are tough. Hope you had a good time. Hope you learned something new. And yeah, see you next time. Bye for now.